Hello and welcome to ReginaldESQ. I'm Underhook and this is my look at the armor changes in patch 9.12. Starting off with this video, we're starting off with the old IS8, which you can see here on the right in my pre-recorded version of Tank Inspector. And on the left is the current live version of Tank Inspecting, featuring the tank is now called the T-10. So it's been renamed, in case you didn't know. No longer called the IS8, now called the T-10. Now you will notice during this recording that the tank on the right, the old IS8, is actually out of proportion with the T-10. That is due to the way I did the pre-recording. I buggered it up. Unfortunately, I can't go back in time and fix it. But the hull of the tank is pretty much, and the height of the tanks are pretty much identical. It's just that the tank on the left in the current version, the T-10, will look like it's higher and not as wide. That's simply due to the way it was recorded. So I apologize for that in advance. So we'll start the recording of the IS8 on the right, and I'll go make a colorized view and we'll get them sort of a bit more frontal on here. Now the hull used to be 120mm thick, and it still is. So the frontal, upper and lower hull is still 120mm. The driver's viewport area was 60 and is still 60. So really there's no change to the frontal hull at all that I can see. However, there are substantial changes to the front. So this red section you can see here on the left on the IS8, the frontal turret area has had a substantial buff. So if we have a look here on the pre-recorded version, the lower section, which is flashing now, there is now 270mm. That area there was previously 201mm. Huge buff. It's only a small area, but it is a prime targeting area for a front-on tank. This area here, which is slightly to the side and above that area, is 220mm, so still much better than 201. And the area above that is 240mm, once again substantially better than 201. So frontally the turret is quite a bit stronger there. Also, this area here is 201mm now. Now previously that area around this area here was 148mm on the recording, and that's now 201. So that's much stronger. And the area above and to the side of the top of the mantlet here is now 201. Previously was much less. I can't remember, but I will show you that in a second when the recording catches up. Underneath the mantlet was 148mm, is now 250mm. However, the mantlet does not extend as far down as it used to. Now these are out of proportion, so this tank looks a little higher, so the gap here looks a little bigger than it does in reality, but it is definitely bigger than it used to be. However, it's substantially buffed on what it used to be as well. So the mantlet though has changed thickness a little bit. So I'm on the mantlet there now. You can see it used to be 250mm on that mantlet. It's now only 210mm. So they reduced the actual purple, well, pink flashing bit, the mantlet there, by about 40mm. However, the armor underneath is much thicker. So you can see here, right here, it's over 250mm, whereas before it's only overlaying 201mm. So the armor it overlays is thicker, so it's pretty much the same as it was before. And it's still impenetrable pretty much, and it was before anyway. So there's no real difference to the mantlet, but the rest of it is substantially buffed in my opinion. So let's get this recording to move along a little bit more, and hopefully I'll show you the other armor bits in a sec. Very hard to know what you're going to look at. So you see there that was 148 on the right, and it's now 201. And if I go to the part above that, you can see there underneath the mantlet 148. Now that's the part I wanted, 129mm, and that's now 201 as well. So a substantial buff to the front of the turret. Now the other areas, this area here is 102mm, and it was 102mm previously, as were the cupolas, also 102mm, no change there. And the green area on top of the turret is 40mm as it was before, so it could still be overmatched by someone with a 122mm gun or bigger. Now that said, let's go to the side of the tank now, and I'll just pause the recording. Actually, I'll pause it when it gets to there. Yep. So so you probably looked at this and thought, oh, the cupola is higher than it used to be. It's not. It's just that the pre-recording, as I said, the dimensions are incorrect. And it looks lower than it really was in the pre-recording. So the cupola actually isn't any bigger on the new tank than it was on the old tank, I don't think. So don't panic about that. Now we can see here that the lower armor, the armor underneath the spaced armor and behind the tracks, is 80mm, and it always was 80mm. However, we had a little bit of a nerf. They've put cutouts in the tracks now, so you can shoot between these spaces here, and you're only getting the 80 armour, and you're missing the 20mm of spaced armour the tracks provided before. So that is a good spot to shoot this tank now, between the tracks. However, the rest of the side of the hull has actually had a buff, as I will show you in a second. So this area here is and was always 30mm of spaced armour overlaying the 80mm. However, the upper hull here is now 120mm, whereas back over here on the pre-recorded version, that whole top section is only 80mm. So it's gone from 80 to 120. That is a substantial buff. Now the spaced armour has extended higher than it used to be, and this from here up, it's 30mm over 80mm, and from here down is 30mm over the it's 30 over 80 from here down, and it's 30 over the 120 from here up. So that's a substantial buff to the side of the tank, and does make it quite a bit stronger. As far as the sides of the turret goes, the front side of the turret is stronger, because remember, this area here is now 201, but the rest of the side of the turret is pretty much identical to the way it used to be. No real change there. Now the lower and upper hull of the tank used to be 60mm. Well, now the lower hull is still 60, but this plate here is actually not a weakness, it's actually strength. It's actually 80mm, this little plate here. So slightly buffed in the lower part of the hull, but the upper part of the hull has had a bit of a nerf. It's now only 50mm, whereas it used to be 60mm. So yeah. Now, whilst the tank overall, the turret has had a substantial buff, and the sides of the hull have had a good buff, the top deck, or the rear top deck here, has had a nerf. It was 30mm, it's now only 16mm. So if you are hit by artillery in the T-10, pretty much the back top deck, it's going to fully penetrate every single time. So definitely more vulnerable to artillery than it was before. Definitely. But probably a lot stronger against regular tanks than it was before. So a bit of a trade-off there. I guess they had to justify the keeping the speed the same by reducing the weight somewhere else if they're increasing the weight of the turret, I guess. So there's that. Now the rear of the turret, you could just see there, I'll go back on the recording a little bit. The rear of the turret was 50mm, and the rear of the turret is now 90mm. So a substantial buff to the rear of the turret. So all over, the turret is stronger. And 90mm is really now, especially because it's curved and everything, there's going to be quite a few tanks that you're going to bounce shots from behind on the turret, which is great, because you used to be you get the thing hull down and still be very vulnerable, but now if you can get hull down, this tank is not so vulnerable. And the games I've had in it, testing it out, it does definitely seem to live a lot longer and do a lot better. This frontal deck section is 30mm still, so at least if someone's shooting HE turret ring, it won't get you, but artillery definitely will get you. Other than that, that's about it for the tank. I hope you enjoyed the armour review of the IS8 now T-10. If you'd like to see more armour reviews coming up, please subscribe to ReginaldESQ. Have fun.